Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about some of the most deeply flawed campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. These campaigns are not necessarily bad in of themselves. In fact, the legendary lords on this list are all very strong in their own way. But the actual design leaves quite a few things to be desired. Starting with Malus Darkblade on this list, his situation is that he's possessed by a demon of Slaanesh. And in theory, the idea of this campaign should be that you get to balance between possession or maintaining your sanity. But the problem is, it doesn't quite work out so very well. The reason it doesn't quite work out is, yes, when you're fully possessed, you get a huge amount of combat benefits and diplomatic relations with demonic factions. Though, diplomatic relations with demonic factions might seem great, but in reality, they're not quite as good as you might think, because Dark Elves themselves are fairly good from a diplomatic standpoint with a lot of different factions, including Chaos. So having diplomatic relations is not worth it. And also suffering from Slaaneshi corruption is in itself a very questionable discussion. So you're basically incentivized in the entirety of your campaign to just basically go full on with full control. Yes, you do lose some combat capability when Malus Darkblade, but you get a ridiculous level of benefits over here, including that plus 100 growth in all provinces. That means he is extremely powerful, undeniably so. But he's also powerful in perhaps the way a legendary lord shouldn't necessarily be powerful. In the sense that you trivialize a lot of the game. Like, you can, at full control, you can spawn an entire endgame army. And this is a proper army. This is not like some disposable something. The units you have here are actual units that you can transfer over to other forces. One of the things I've heard said about Malus Darkblade is that the intent of this campaign had been originally to actually do Rakarth. And then they figure out, well, Malus is more popular, so let's do it. From that perspective, you do get certain objectives to do, but they kind of feel rather meaningless. There's some useful things, useful tidbits, but having a legendary lord that can spawn an endgame army as Dark Elves, who are already very freaking strong in their campaign as is, and trivializing the growth situation while also giving you the ability to go full on freaking possession if you want to and get a ridiculous amount of combat ability is not perhaps the best way to do a campaign. Because it means that you're building a massive empire with very little challenge to begin with. Your campaign starts over here far away from Nagaron, then Ulthuan. Doesn't necessarily work all that well, especially since your objective is to take over Ulthuan. And then on top of that, you get the ability of having a gift, getting a gift from the Witch King, which depends on the amount of territory that Malekith has under his control. And that does give you heroes of all types, but kind of trivializes the situation of heroes because Dark Elves can and do get a ton of heroes in their campaigns inherently. So what I'm trying to say here is Malus Darkblade makes his benefits in a campaign are pretty redundant, and combat capability, especially given the fact that you're much stronger than any faction next to you, just again makes things just redundant and trivializes the entire campaign experience. It's kind of a weird situation really with Malus, because on one hand he's certainly a very strong lord, but on the other hand, I think I can speak for a lot of people, very few people enjoy playing this faction among the Dark Elves. I mean, Dark Elves have, in general, an issue of popularity in the game right now, but I think there is a reason why very few people care about this campaign in the first place. Next up on the list is Alarielle the Radiant. Another very powerful legendary lord in the campaign, or rather she's very powerful because she can get more handmaidens than everyone else, and handmaidens give you ridiculous levels of control, diplomacy, income from trade tariffs, as well as growth, which are very nice and beneficial effects. On top of that, every territory she goes to gets power of nature, so that's influence, control, and growth. So Alarielle is really good in terms of an empire builder. The problem is that while that's all well and fine, her skill line leaves a lot to be desired. Her magical capability is not particularly great, nor is the fact that she has Mortal Worlds Torment. Even back in Warhammer 2, it was very questionable to talk about Mortal Worlds Torment. Yes, you do get Dwellers Below, yes, you get a bunch of benefits for Forest Spirit units, but even back in that game where Corruption was a very different beast, it was not that common to see a situation where you would actually have to deal with this all that often, and that just indicates how Alarielle's campaign design isn't especially great. Then you have the fact that you have a choice of a special skill line between Blood and Fire and Tradition Dictates, but Tradition Dictates is a significantly better skill line in every way, shape, or form. It's even better from a combat perspective because you buff up Sisters of Avalorn for her own army, you get more handmaidens, you get handmaiden recruitment all across the board, so why would you not go for this? I mean, you do trivialize the Sword of Cain, and that's kind of the weapon you're meant to use. But while those things are a bit of a problem in Alarielle's campaign, the biggest issue, really, in this campaign has to do with the Defender of Ulthuan. So, what Defender of Ulthuan does is it makes your early game an annoyance. Really, just an annoyance. And in the sense, especially, that you have a higher construction cost for all your buildings faction-wide from the beginning. The way it works is that if any other race except High Elves controls Inner Ulthuan, you are going to suffer that significant construction cost penalty. And you're still going to suffer some penalties if any faction controls Outer Ulthuan. And since there's Nakari and Noctilus, as well as other factions that will be invading Ulthuan, then you can kind of understand the problem. Like, it creates a situation where the early game is always annoying to tackle in a campaign, and then the late game is just trivial. Like, Alarielle is insanely powerful. Like, her scalability in a campaign is ridiculous, because once you deal with that, and you will, but once you deal with that specific situation, once you do optimize your campaign situation, you do end up dominating the campaign map because of all the benefits she has. I mean, you can take all of Lorem because Magical Forest is suitable to you. But not a great campaign dynamic to deal with. We could also talk about Naggareth and the climate there that Tyrion and Alarielle both have to deal with, that it's either unpleasant or uninhabitable, depending on who we're talking about there. So, not a great dynamic to be dealing with. And I think Grave Assembly missed the mark with the High Elf rework, because with the High Elf rework with Patrons of the Realm, you now have the capability of confederating all other factions of Ulthuan, but very importantly, it's a much better mechanic than Defender of Ulthuan, because with Patrons of the Realm, you actually do care about High Elven factions controlling the territory of Ulthuan for confederation purposes, for the seats, because if they're not controlling these provinces, then you won't be able to use those seats. So it just makes Defender of Ulthuan a rather pointless mechanic to deal with. Like, it's irrelevancy. Like, and it's a better system, by the way, of making you care about Ulthuan than what Defender does. And also, Defender of Ulthuan is a weird mechanic, because if there's anyone who should have Defender of Ulthuan, it's Tyrion, because he is literally the Defender of Ulthuan. That's one of the titles he has. The fact that Alarielle has that is just a bit bizarre. Well, more than a bit bizarre in her campaign. So, again, Creative Assembly really missed this mark. And an interesting tidbit, Queen of the Crown, the DLC that Alarielle is part of, is actually one of the least popular DLCs in the game. Now, that's not a perspective I have, personally. I think I would certainly not rate it one of the worst DLCs, and that's not my perspective. But there have been polls, and a lot of people just don't like this DLC. And they don't like this DLC because the campaigns are not especially well designed. Though, I think people are being a bit harsh, really, on Hellebrand. I think she has a much better campaign than people give her credit for. Alarielle, on the flip side, she's just annoying. And really, that annoyance is compounded by the fact that when you're playing Alarielle, the one thing you're actually going to deal with, and I think it's only exclusive to this, is Hellebrand is going to use those blood voyages against you. So enjoy dealing with those kind of endgame Dark Elven armies. I mean, it spices things up to a degree, and then, yeah, you just trivialize the entire campaign eventually, especially once you get the Sword of Cain. And finally, at number 1 on this list, we have Belegar Ironhammer. And I think, honestly, out of all the campaigns that I've talked about so far, Belegar is the biggest tragedy. Like, Alarielle having a questionable campaign, Malus Darkblade having an irrelevant campaign, those are one things. But Belegar, he's a pretty cool character. He's got an interesting story behind him. He is relevant in the lore. And he can be amazing in the campaign as a lord. Not so much, however, to play his faction. Like, if we look at the benefits, he gets those special heroes, he gets the true king of Caracade Peak, so missile block chance, Mighty of Stone, leadership against certain factions, and then his special skill line is just ridiculously good. Campaign movement range, construction cost for province and capital settlement buildings. It ends up being pretty amazing in a lot of different ways what he has on offer. But the problem is, for all those great things which make Belegar worth confederating if you're playing any other Dwarf Lord, the key issue is he does have that plus 50% upkeep until he retakes Caracade Peaks. And the problem with that is not just the fact that you're going to suffer from an upkeep situation until you take it back. The issue is, once you do take it back, you get oath fulfilled. And this is a ridiculous benefit, like 100 experience per turn, Lord Crew rank control, leadership when fighting against greenskins, and obviously removing the upkeep downside. So you just go from having a painful campaign to trivializing the entire campaign experience. And if there's anything to indicate what campaigns got on this list, it is precisely that, like a shitty start or questionable start, and then just dominating everyone in your path. It's a bad campaign design to have that. And I think that's been a problem in Total War campaigns for a very, very long time. And in fact, in Warhammer 3, they've moved against that to some extent and went back with it, especially with Aislinn and such. But it means that you're either abandoning your initial province in order to rush Caracade Peaks and then just dominating the campaign with that, or you're spending a lot of your early game dealing with that plus 50% upkeep. And I'll be honest, it's actually better for your campaign strategy, long-term strategy to not care about Caracade Peaks initially and just sort things out here, including burning all of Lorem to the ground. And that's not a joke, by the way. Because that gives you a legendary grudge. So that means with that specific legendary grudge completed, you can get more settled grudges, which helps you with regards to Confederation, and also getting the Oak of Ages sorted out is pretty damn nice. Like, yeah, you do get this landmark over here, which pretty damn powerful when you're thinking about it, and the benefit of the Oak of Ages in itself. But again, not a good campaign design when you're supposed to be in the race for Caracade Peaks, but what the campaign ends up doing for you is punishing you for that, and then just trivializing the game if you succeed on that level. And it's really a shame because, honestly, Belegar could be that much better as a legendary lord. He has a great skill line, great combat ability, cool character design. It is genuinely a tragedy. Like, when we look at Malus Darkblade, his lord design is questionable. And when we look at Alarielle, her magical design is questionable. Belegar is a damn good lord with a good skill line, with good combat ability, with quest battles, with a lot of great stuff in it. And he's ruined by that very bad design that Creative Assembly decided to go for. And like, I cannot fathom why Creative Assembly, of all the decisions they had back in Warhammer 1, they decided to put Belegar over here in the vaults and then Skarsnik basically around here in the Southern Great Mountains. when they're supposed to be fighting over Carricade Peaks. It's not like the area of the campaign map in Warhammer 1 in the Badlands was chock full of legendary lords, because it was not. I mean, you had Grimgore and Forgrim, basically, and Warsack, sure, to some extent, but there was space, and instead they put them here. That was just a really weird design decision by CA, and we kept that decision since then. They moved Skarsnik with Warhammer 1, so he ends up having a better campaign. Belegar's still stuck over here. It's quite a shame. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Christine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and I'll see you on the next one.